Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing very well today. Today, I'd like to talk about the challenges that we have sometimes with various types of life around us that we then cope with in very mundane ways, and how some of these types of coping strategies can work for a very short amount of time, but how they themselves can become their own challenges for us. And when we have in this world problems and we have anxieties and burdens, life, we are working all the time, we're going from task to task, we oftentimes search for a break. And we search for something that is relaxing or is pacifying to the constant flow of activity. And sometimes these types of activities that we do, or types of restful moments, can actually become a bit out of control because we create very subtle fixations to them. So I'll give you an example. For many of us, we watch TV after a long day, or we'll watch YouTube after a long day. And that is a way for us to relax. We have our day and we think about going to work or doing our various activities that we maybe are trying to get through every moment, every day at least. And then we have these other types of strategies that we have actually some amount of awareness in, that um, we go into. We utilize. And some of these are like watching TV or watching YouTube or having a glass of wine, or just laying down on the couch for a little while and browsing on our phone or reading the news. These types of activities, or scrolling, other types of social networks and all of that. These are activities that we're very aware of, actually. But what we're using them for is a break, a distraction away from the real life that we're living in, our real problems that we think that are very real, and then we take a break with these coping strategies. And there's many of these, and these types of things are perfectly fine. And of course, useful for us to maintain some amount of harmony and balance. We don't want to have a situation where we are so fixated to being busy all day or working all day long that we don't ever give ourselves a break. So it is actually a bit of wisdom that we are allowing ourselves to rest. But what can happen sometimes is that when we are so burdened by the world around us or by our daily activities, our daily tasks, what can sometimes happen is that we use these coping strategies and we keep using them until we become very fixated to them. And we think all day long about getting to that moment where we can maybe rest. Maybe we can have that glass of wine. Maybe we can enjoy some moments in front of the TV or whatever. And then what can happen sometimes is that the amount of time that we get in these coping strategies, in these moments of distraction or a break, can then become something where we want that more and more and more. And maybe for some of that us, that means that we'll stay up later than we intended, watching the shows, binging TV, or maybe our break is eating some junk food, and we'll create a trend of doing that more and more. Maybe it'll start every Friday night, we'll have a little treat, and then eventually we're doing it more and more as our coping strategies for our lives. And that means that we, have unhealthy habits that begin, and then later potentially addiction. Maybe we'll have some addiction to some of this. And as we have more and more needs, the less and less these coping strategies actually feel relaxing. Instead, we feel almost like we're not getting it, our life is bad, and even when we're getting it, we want more and more of that. So these are the types of things that can happen to us from time to time, and especially in this world that we live in right now with so much anxiety in the inside of our bodies, and we have some latent anxiety that is always there for many of us, some amount of discomfort all day long. We really feel the need to have these types of activities. I mean, it could be also playing games, video games, all of that. So how do we achieve balance? How do we make sure that we aren't pulled deeply into fixation in a way that then becomes self-destructive? And this is a constant challenge for us. But one of the most important things that we can do, first and foremost, is to become aware of these moments. And that really starts with an invitation to ourselves to see all of this and to not be afraid of what we might uncover inside of ourselves. And that also can come with a perspective of, this is all okay. It's nothing but habits. All of our habits are just that. They're not anything else than habitual tendencies. That doesn't mean that they have any problem deep down. It's not like we're a bad person or we're faulty in some way. We've just established habits. And when we acknowledge that we're not bad and that these types of activities aren't real problems in themselves, then we actually are inviting ourselves for greater awareness. What can happen sometimes, and very subtly, is that and then part of the reason why we've maybe had a spiraling out of control where we consume more and more, for example, or we spend longer and longer time in these coping strategies or coping activities, is because as we are doing them, we subtly look away in our minds. We don't look at ourselves actually doing them. There's some amount of inward distraction that is happening because we feel a little bit of wrongness, maybe a little taboo, if you will. We feel that the activity that we're doing has maybe gone a little too far. We all have this relationship with maybe potato chips, for example. I mean, there's a lot of things in our lives that are manufactured in such a way to make us want more and more. And when we subtly have gone past the area where we felt like that was enough, and now we're just eating, our mind subtly can say, well, I'm not going to look at that anymore because that is bad. It's wrong that I've let go fully and now I'm just gorging myself or whatever that is. Or I'm binging this TV show that I had no I never intended to binge, for example. So these types of things, we subtly inside of our minds look away from a very small amount of self-disgust. We're almost like, why am I doing that, well, I don't really want to look at that. So I'm not going to look at, I'm just going to kind of like sleep. My awareness is going to go to sleep so that I don't have to watch this part. And then, the body just moves itself in a lot of ways. You sit in front of the TV and you zone out, for example. And during that zoning out period, 2, 3 hours, 4, 5, 6 hours can go by. Or if you're playing a game, same kind of thing. Or if we're eating, a same kind of thing. Or if we're drinking, especially because of the alcohol and the way that alcohol affects us, the same sort of thing. So all of that can then create a very spiral. And that spiral subtly has to do with the fact that we have disengaged our awareness. We've disengaged actually our mental involvement in the activity. We've said, okay, I'm not going to even look at this because maybe it's just a little disturbing that I have no control over that. So, how can we bring that awareness back? First, we can say it's okay not to have control over this. It's totally okay not to have control over this. And if we say that, then rather than us looking away in those moments, we will still be present in those moments. We won't subtly zone out while we're eating. Instead, we'll say, no, it's okay to binge every now and again. This is okay. But when I binge, I want to be aware that I'm actually doing it. I want to actually be present while I'm doing it. And the activity of then being present, the moment that we then are able to maintain some amount of presence, actually changes the entire feeling around the addiction or the coping mechanism that has gone awry. Because now that we are engaged mentally, we are aware and we've said, I'm not disgusted by this. This is cool. This is fine. It suddenly has lost a lot of its taboo. It's lost a lot of its wrongness in our minds that we have sort of fixated to, like, I can't control that, and so I'm being a bit naughty, you know? And so that now isn't there because we're being present during all of that and we're saying it is okay. We're recognizing it's totally okay. There is no such thing as me being a naughty person and staying up until, the wee hours playing this game or eating too much or drinking too much. Actually, instead, that's not naughty. It's perfectly fine. It's no different than me going to work every day because I'm just as aware now as I am at work. If we can then get to that place where we then recognize, this is just another activity, then the coping moments are not as interesting in themselves and not able to be fixated. It's not really going to cause us any additional fixation. Instead, we'll feel, we'll use them as they come naturally, but then it won't it won't have any extra teeth in our mind streams. Any extra feeling of imprisonment that suddenly happens that's very common in addiction. When we are addicted, we feel like our addiction is a prison, like it's pulling us deeper and deeper and deeper, and we have no control. We even might feel like our true selves are screaming to get away, but the addiction's pulling us down. And part of the reason for that is that actually is mentally what we're doing. We're looking away from the addiction. I don't want to look at the addiction. I don't want to look at the addiction. We're saying that over and over and over. So then when we're engaging in that addiction to some degree, or that vice or whatever that is, our minds are so sleepy and we're looking away from it that then we are being just pulled by that. And some of the ways that this is described in the Eastern world is being pulled by karmic winds. And karmic really just means causes. Causes, and then this is the effect of those causes. The causes are really just a habit. We've created habits that have gotten us to a place where we have very strong habits, but we're being pulled away by our habits. And the reason that we're being pulled away by our habits versus being able to create new habits or different habits is because very subtly in our minds, we've disengaged our awareness. We've said our awareness, our wisdom, it's not going to be here right now. We're taking a break from this wisdom, from this awareness by engaging in this activity. So this activity is somehow separate from our awareness, from our wisdom. And because of that, that activity then pulls us left and right because we're truly totally sleepy. We are in our minds. We're sleepy minded. Dull minded is another way of describing it. We are not present is another way of describing it. We are disengaged or looking somewhere else. And that can create, again, this spiral activity, this spiraling habituation that then goes more and more and more. And so, we have a lot of these dysfunctional types of coping mechanisms in our worlds. Things like fetishes, things like, some of these, of course, all of them are okay unless they've gone awry. And what does that mean? It means that we are so deeply engaged in them that we cannot be present in a way that's not totally engaged in that. We have so many things in our lives that we are called to do, and some of these are unpleasant, like going to work, for example, or doing things like that, doing various types of activities. These are sometimes we think that even doing activities for others can be quite unpleasant, especially to our egoic natures. But the thing is, if we are totally fixated on these types of vices in a way that then they've morphed and kind of taken us over, if you will, what happens is then we're not really able to let them go when appropriate. There are some times where it's appropriate to let them go completely. As we know, I mean, there are certain times where it's appropriate to have a glass of wine. There's certain times where it's not appropriate to have a glass of wine. Around certain people, that might cause offense, for example. It might just distress people. So we wouldn't do it then, right? But when we have gotten to a place where we can't say no, where it's so wonderful and delightful or interesting to us in our habituation, or we feel so imprisoned by it or enchained by it that we cannot let it go when needed, then that's what I'm talking about. That's basically the time when it's gone awry. Besides that, it's okay, but then it's something that we have to maintain some amount of awareness. And a lot of these types of real interests in certain taboo topics, things that are, naughty, or that it's because we actually feel that they are. We are engaging in it because we ourselves feel a wrongness to it to a very subtle degree. And it's not that, and this is a little bit of a nuance here, because I'm not talking about preferences, and I'm not talking about actually like ingrained things like, maybe sexual identities and things like that. Those are very deep. What I'm really talking about here is things that we, didn't have, we didn't feel like we had growing up. This wasn't really part of us. And then all of a sudden, through habitual tendencies, they became more and more habituated, in part because we felt that they were wrong, or that there was something interesting in them because of their uh, they charged something up. They were a great break for us in a way that um, made us feel somehow safer than normal or more delighted than normal. And the all of this kind of stuff has to do again with creating these habits. And we've just created all these habits that have elicited us into a place of over interest and overindulgence in certain things. It is totally fine to indulge now and again. Um, but the place, if we do not have awareness in what we're doing, then oftentimes we can become ruled by the types of things that we put around us. And that's exactly what I'm talking about here. This can be a situation, there are situations where we create coping strategies that go awry. And at first, they were perfectly fine. They were, we were having, for example, I'm using this alcohol example, but we were having a glass of wine, every few days. And it was, a way for us to de stress after a long day of work. That's not a problem. That's not unhealthy. There's, some doctors might say that there's data about, um, antioxidants potentially where it says, oh, that might not be the worst thing in the world, in terms of, alcohol consumption. But then all of a sudden we liked the taste of it, we liked the feeling it gave us, and now it's not just once every few days, it's now once every day, and then now it's not once every day, it's, 2 or 3 glasses a day, and then all of a sudden it's bottle. And that's what happens sometimes. And we know about that, and we're aware of that in our culture. When it goes too far, we have examples of this in our lives, and we say, oh, that's so sad that that happened to them. But the only reason that that happened to them, and it's not, quote, happening to us, is because of our habits haven't gone out of control. And the reason that some people's habits go out of control versus other people's habits don't go out of control is really because of the awareness. And this awareness happens to be, um, I'm also kind of glossing over physiological differences, right? There's of course that as well. But the awareness is such a huge piece of it, which is to see the fact that we are doing what we are doing, to actually be present. And that is a habit in itself. To create that habit of presence in the activities that we are doing, rather than there are certain activities that are breaks where I don't need to be aware. And then there's certain activities that I'm obviously focused, overly focused. To create that type of duality then makes it so that we are oftentimes miserable. We're miserable, and then at the same, we're miserable during the work times, and then we're delighted or quote unquote relaxed during the vice moment or the coping mechanism moment. But the reality is that we've created that in our minds. It doesn't have to be that way. We can actually be in a situation where the it's flip-flopped. We're actually more aware, and we heighten our awareness when we're engaged in the break, and we're less aware when we're at work. There's the only difference is that we've said that the work is a lot more important. But what's interesting is that what we see is that the um, the deeper the habits, the deeper the enjoyment in a way that is not we're not aware about, then the more it lords over us. The less we question whether or not the thing that we're doing is good, uh, on an or is appropriate now for the benefit of others, the more it can potentially rule our lives. So that's the last piece I'll leave you with, which is, how do we also be free of this? Well, if we're engaged in things that are for the benefit of other people, other beings, then that's a really, really good North Star. And it will keep us honest in relationship with our various types of fixations. As I was talking about work and coping mechanisms, there's certain people that are addicted to work, right? There's workaholics out there too. So, and we know that there are, that that's his own level of fixation. So we have the fixation is something that can be all encompassing on any type of activity, can cause some sort of fixation. In this video, I'm mostly focused on coping mechanisms. But how do we be how can we be really sure about what we're doing and whether or not we're doing it for the right reason? Well, take a look at our intention. And if we look at our intention and say, well, I'm doing this at this moment because it's beneficial to others, and I'm viewing it in that way. I'm doing this because, for example, if I had a long day of work and I'm feeling very tight in my body and a little anxious, and this will help me be nicer to my friends if I allow myself the 10 minutes, to play a game or to watch some TV or whatever. That will loosen up my tension enough for me to be present with others. So this is going to be for their benefit. Then our minds will basically be aware of how much is needed. And then once we kind of get past that to a place where it's like, no, I'm just doing it because I want to and it's fun. And I just want to stay up until 4 in the morning doing whatever this coping mechanism thing is, watching TV or binging something. That's no longer helpful to my friends. That's no longer helpful to my family. I have to wake up tomorrow and be there. It's no longer helpful to my world. So that creates its own barrier as well, its own guardrails to these types of activities, where if we're really intending that all of our activities are for the benefit of those around us, then we can have breaks. We can engage in these types of things, but they become balanced because we are only doing them and engaging with them insofar as we are helping others. Furthermore, in our minds, we get a secondary reward. And that reward is much more potent in our mind streams than whatever like temporary delight we might get from the coping mechanism. And that reward is that we are actually believing that we're helping others through our activities. And that in itself is a tremendous antidote from any types of fixation or addiction. We won't go into a world of fixation where we're blowing up our lives or engaging in things that are so self-driven that others would view us as self-destructive, and we feel like also deep down that we're also being self-destructive. So these are a few different ways of viewing these types of fixations. You may have these types of fixations. You may not feel like you do. All of us have things that we enjoy and things that we do not. And so there are certain things that we create that we have as coping strategies. So whatever that is for you, inspect it, look at it while it's happening, aspire for greater awareness while you're doing it, and don't don't shy away. It's okay. All of this is okay. It's okay even to be in the throes of something that you would consider to be wrong and bad. It's part of the world. And if you recognize that it is okay, that's the first step to having it entirely dissolve. Because once it's okay, it becomes a lot less interesting. And then once you then integrate it to for the benefit of others, you say, okay, well, how can I benefit others? Then also it will naturally find harmony in itself. So thank you so much. I hope something in my words is applicable, or that you can apply it or help others with it. So thank you so much. Until next time, be well.